Welcome back. I've got Kendall Wallace on. Kendall, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing so well, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Oh, thank you for being on the show. This is a really, really important topic that we're going to discuss today because it's something that both you and I see time and time again with companies and individuals and all that. So, why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into this important conversation?
Sure, yeah. My name is Kendall Wallace. I'm the CEO and lead facilitator of a company called Executive Offsites. And maybe yeah. And what we do is we create like world-class team building experiences for corporate teams that are off the beaten path, that really are awe-inspiring experiences where we also clean up communication within the team dynamic. So it hits the note of really having a great experience together while improving team dynamics, and then also really going to work on an aligned deliverable to get that ROI for some of the C-suite for these types of investments.
Yeah, I love those types of events that are outside of the box, I guess. In not that the typical team building exercises aren't helpful, but though I find the ones that are extremely unique somewhere else, get away from the office. I mean, it's almost impossible to go somewhere without cell phone coverage, but at least keep your iBinky to the side. That's my brother's nickname for my iPhone, by the way, because I'm always on it like a pacifier. But it's those events make such a big difference because it just, in cruising your website and looking at different experiences and things that people have done in the past, what jumped out at me was not the fact that, okay, there's people that are playing some type of activity or sport and they're using strategy and all of that. The synergies between that and planning out things in a work environment and coordinating projects and communication and figuring out everybody understands the playbook and what we need to do next. So many companies would benefit from that if they actually followed that playbook that was understandable, excuse me, by everyone and isn't just in the CEO's head.
Totally. And like one of the biggest challenges we have in remote work these days is belonging. I mean, people are in essence there's a lot of mercenaries going on. There's a lot of team switching mercenaries, like whatever. The sign of the first conflict. All right, I'm out. I'm gonna switch teams. I'll go somewhere else. There's a lot of that, and it's like and lack of connection. I think it stemmed from lack of connection, but also lack of belonging, and that's where like actually, yes, there's definitely fun in games, but fun in games in a deep way too, like something that really like almost connects you to childhood, and then coupled with some prompts to get people like connecting on a deeper level. Like, yes, it's cool that they know so and so has three kids or whatever like that, but like in essence the conversations of like, why are you here, like why are you on this team, why are you motivated to show up, like I feel like there's an aspect of where that's missing. And unless we kind of make it happen, unless there's a facilitator there to actually prod the team to like go a little bit deeper than the surface for some of these questions and hear from everybody, right? So then they don't really happen. And you miss out on like, okay, if left to their own devices, maybe a couple people will share, but not the whole group. You know what I mean? And so it's that connection of belonging from everyone and understanding everyone's motivations that I think is so vital nowadays.
It's vital, and I definitely see it missing. And I think back to earlier in my career, for those organizations that I really had a good time with. Yes, the work was challenging in some cases, and sometimes you'd get upset with the management or the clients or everybody under the sun. That's one thing. But upon reflection, looking back at it, is you think about the coworkers, and I think about okay, I know that he was interested in this and he was doing this and this person was doing that and she was exploring an opportunity to relocate to a different state. These are all, life-based types of situations with people, and I find that those same types of conversations aren't happening as much, at least in, the conversations that I've had in workplaces that I've seen, and, even a place that
Yeah.
I'm helping out now, it's a small team, and we know, some details about some of the team members, but not everything. Not that we need to per se, but
Right.
there's certain things, that should be known, and even and I'll use a personal example. A couple months ago, my mother passed away, and I was
Oh, I'm
helping out
sorry to
this
hear
place.
that.
Thank you. And the place that I'm, helping out and doing some work with, I asked the owner. I said, because I was gone for about 10 days, and they welcomed me back and whatnot, and everyone was kind of acting normal around me, didn't say anything, and I asked, I said, does the team know while I was gone? And like, yeah. And they said, oh, okay. And it was kind of surreal. It was like
Mm.
business as usual. Not that I was looking for everybody to come hug me or anything like that. If they wanted to, great. I'm not opposed to that. But it was kind of surreal. Like, okay, it's over, move on, kind of thing. And I'm like, it's like
Well,
this is still a fresh wound, guys, but it was an interesting observation because I was looking at it at wow, we're really disconnected in the workforce these days.
yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. Like even in that example. So what I think is interesting is if you make the best use of time with those offsites of like actually, you know, teaching people the skills of like this is how, of enabling people to ask for what they need. And then also like know to not, know when to offer like honest care and empathy. It's interesting in that situation, you coming back in, like if you had had some sort of discussion with your colleagues, like do you think, you know, over the course of some sort of training, it's almost like you would have been empowered to deeper ask for what you needed, and maybe they would have been enabled to ask better questions of like how to be supportive to you, and not like ignore it. And then it's this weird elephant in the room that everyone feels awkward about and no one feels connected around, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it just was an interesting thing because I thought back to when I was working with another organization uh, just prior to the pandemic, and my father had passed away literally like 4 days before the pandemic was globally announced that it was a global pandemic, and that was a completely different situation, where everybody reached out and said, "What do you need? How are you?" And I even had to do the quarantine thing for a couple of weeks, so I couldn't go back because I, had, been exposed, and it was not to pick on any states or anything, but it was my parents were in a state that was a little more lax in the early days of the pandemic. I'll let people do the math on that, and they weren't as progressive on, covering up and doing the things that a lot of other places were doing. So it was a case of, okay, I've been on an airplane, I've been in the airport, I've done all this stuff, so I need to, kind of lay low for a couple of weeks, make sure that I haven't been exposed to it. But it was a completely different experience where, though that group was, touching base and checking with me, well after it's like everything's good, and I told them, I see, yeah, I'm good, I'm moving forward.
Mm.
Mom's being taken care of, and all of that was sorted. So it was, two opposite reactions to the loss of a loved one. And it was just, again,
Wow.
I was looking at it from a work standpoint and just, in this conversation right now, thinking about the contrast of that. And some of it was age driven. The people that I worked with that were, when my dad passed, are, my age and above, around that, where the other
Oh,
organization is younger. And I'm not being critical of
interesting.
anybody, but I think the social connectivity of people, and I laugh
Mm,
about social media. I say it should have been called antisocial because it seems to have driven people further and further away from each other face to face and in person. And they're
mhm.
spending more time on their social media platforms instead of going out and being social with people and whatnot. But just an observation that I've seen with some of the generations. And again, not picking on them. I'm not, just an observation. If it works for them and they're happy, awesome. But
Mm,
I'm not seeing people happy, so that's why I'm questioning it.
yeah. Well, can I ask, so you mentioned about a team that you worked with years ago, and I'm not sure if it's the same team, but I was just kind of curious, like, what made your team operate so effectively? The one that you were referencing earlier.
Uh,
Um,
a lot of things. I think that collectively, many of them had been working together for a very long time, so
yeah,
they knew very well, and they worked with each other for a very long time, so they knew. Yeah, it was more like it had a family feel to it. So
yeah,
including the dynamics of some backhanded compliments and sarcasm and whatnot,
right.
which would probably violate most HR laws. But on the other side, they were all, it was more like a family type of thing than anything because they'd been working together for so long. But I think that was the biggest dynamic is just because they knew everybody and they were just that was their nature as a collective because
Right.
the founder of their organization was that way before he passed and seems like everybody around me is dying. I don't know this. Hopefully that doesn't transfer through in Zoom calls, but I just kind of thought about that. I'm like, wow, okay. I'm kind of going in where people are going, but that's another
Yeah,
story for another day. It happens. We all
yeah.
have expiry dates. But I think at the end of the day, the team dynamics are something that are, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, are both organically can come together, but they need some nurturing, just like a garden. You can't just like
Yeah,
plant it and forget it. It's something that needs nurturing and tendering to a lot.
for sure. Yeah, there's an interesting book called Tribal Leadership. Talks about the different stages of teams and about really how to get to that high performance team level. And one of the ways to do that is actually go over the different scenarios. One is to just start a company with friends. It speaks to that longevity you talked about. It's like the innate trust, because that's the actual thing that we're trying to design for, is trust. Because when people don't trust each other, that's when stuff goes haywire. So it's the trust factor of okay, you can have it with people who are already friends. You can have it when one person offshoots in a department to talk to create a new strategic initiative, and then they recruit their own team. Or you can do the third category, which is the most challenging, which is the one that most companies do, which is we're hiring this mishmash of people and now we got to get them to connect. And without, yeah, I mean, it's just it's really powerful how simple too, like, certain questions of asking people, what they think their value on the team is, and like actually having a moment of pause to have a group discussion where people, in a maybe not a group of 20, but like in small groups, have this conversation where they talk about what value they're bringing in, and like basically there's this moment to be individual and to shine, but it's also to know for everybody else to have the empathy to learn like kind of where that person's place is on their value that they're bringing. And it's like it's just so important to have these moments. And I see where, like, I worked at a big tech company and we did not have that. And it was just a free for all of team switching, honestly. And yeah, that's the dilemma we're in, right? People want remote work. It's not going away. Here's the thing: in order to create like teammateship, it really does depend on utilizing these moments. And I'll even go a step further. I mean, I think definitely utilizing these moments in offsites. And again, this is where you need a facilitator because, quite frankly, if people left to their own devices, they're just not going to necessarily go that deep where everyone in the circle is recognized, right? And that's kind of what a facilitator does. The people who are shy will kind of stay over there if and it's just really creating that context for psychological safety, right? Because that's how we know teams really thrive. And I forgot where I was going, but yeah, that was
Well,
a
I'm
bit.
glad. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned psychological safety because there's a lot of that, where people don't feel comfortable. Or I love how you mentioned why are you here? What share, or what your value is to this company or what you perceive it to be. Because often, and I've been part of organizations that have done that and they've said it. And what I find after the first couple, everybody starts getting a little bit more comfortable because what happens, they say, well, I'm here and I'm just this or this. And someone will become a champion for that employee and say, you know, Bonnie, no, you are much more than that. If without you, this is this. So it ends up turning into a praise fest in a way, but also it reinforces to the employee, wait a minute, somebody's noticing what I'm doing. And it makes such a huge difference because I think that's a big thing. And we've talked about it. And it's when people feel seen and valued and appreciated, they'll they're gonna go the extra block, as my brother likes to joke. But they're gonna work harder, not to their own detriment per se, but they're going to be okay. I want to hold up my end in making things better for everybody involved. And when they do that, that's when you start seeing the dynamics work. And that's when you see teams that, example, use your services will say, we need to do that again. We have to do that again, but do something different. But we want to do that again because they were nurtured, they were fed. They're no longer hungry or starving for that sensation and feeling. And that's where obviously the training that you provide helps them carry that forward once they leave that retreat, once they leave the field and they get back into the trenches of their work lives. It's like here you've got the tools now. Okay, you know how to use them. Okay, it's going to be slow and clunky at first, sure, but you're still using them. You're going to get better at it. And then it just becomes, for those organizations that really want to do it, it becomes part of their DNA. And that's just how they operate now. And all of a sudden, they're leaving amazing testimonials and enticing other organizations. Look, you'll turn your company around by doing this. You should do this. This should not be something you should question. Stop what you're doing and go sign up, type of thing.
Yeah. Well, I would even go as far to say that if you're not creating the context for people to feel value, seen, and heard, you're really missing psychological safety. Like without people feeling valued, seen, and heard, you're missing psychological safety, and thus like people aren't safe. They're in survival mode, trying to prove their worth. And as we know, you need psychological safety to have a high performing team. So it's really important to make sure each person really has that moment to feel value, seen, and heard. And really, when you take time out, during the offsite to actually build that into the design, that's what's so vital. But I also think like whether it's periodical offsites, which a lot of companies will do like, maybe once or twice a year, or just even and once a month or once a quarter type of like just moment to connect virtually is just so vital to kind of exactly what you said, build that into the culture of like building a culture of human connection, quite frankly. It's like we're building a culture of like understanding, it's like almost like we've gone too far on the pendulum swing and now we have to like redesign for these human moments because otherwise what are we? you know
Yeah, it reminds me of this is during the early days of the COVID pandemic where there was a team meeting at that organization that I had mentioned, and everybody, came, the agenda was written out, and all of a sudden everybody started giving updates on, okay, well, this is where we're at on this project, this is where we're at this project. They started doing that, and I'm like, everybody stop. And this was, I think, early May. So the pandemic, middle of March. So, almost a couple of months after that. And they started going into this is what's going on with this. This is where we're at on this project. And I said, everybody stop. So I want everybody to go around the room and I'm going to ask you, how are you doing? And I need more than a one-word answer. How are you coping through this? What are some things that you have found helpful to help you cope with this? Where are some areas that you need help? Shares whatever you're comfortable with. Okay. And just kind of open up. And, we had that meeting and it went to the point and I said, okay. And I say, is there any pressing issues we need to talk about any of the projects? Really, anything? You need any help? There was like a couple things. It took like 3 minutes to go through it. It's like, okay, that's good. All right. Meeting adjourned. We don't need to hash all those things out. This was more of a let's see where everybody's at, and help each other out. Do everything you need to do to take care of you and your loved ones, and let us know
yeah
if there's anything we can do. And it was just that came to me as like I need to do this because I was sitting in this meeting and I'm going, this doesn't matter right now. It really doesn't. That they can't get this part or this thing right now. I don't care. That's trivial compared to how is everybody doing. And later on, people would come up to me and say, that was so helpful to me. Thank you. Like, I'm glad it came to me in mind because it wasn't top of mind for me at first, but it was just a sensation that I noticed. Like, no, let's change the direction of this conversation to just about how everyone is. And I think as organizations do that more and more, it'll bring more of that human side of things to work.
well it's also too I think there's after projects too there can be debriefs or like what went right, what went wrong, that type of thing. And what I've seen a lot of times is like all right, let's immediately go to the post-it notes. And I've even been guilty of this myself, like let's go, let's get to work here. But I think there's also a moment to do it a little bit different. Sure, you can ideate with post-it notes, but there's like this aspect of looking around the table, right? And like actually hearing from everyone. And especially in person too, is actually looking in the eye. That's another trait actually of high performing teams is how often they look each other in the eye, like everyone at the table. And then also, there's a difference between when a leader poses a question. So you have that built in hierarchy, and then if you notice, next time you're in a group, you might want to notice this, but like where people will talk directly to the leader, right? Or if somebody else asks the question, they'll talk directly to the person that asked the question in a group setting. But it's like, it's kind of this opportunity to look around and make eye contact. And actually, those are the traits of real teams that people don't want to leave. That's the high performing aspect is like, am I communicating not just with the leader but everyone at the table, and am I making eye contact? And like these are built-in moments for to incorporate more humanity. And I think it's also something that it just takes a moment from like let's take a pause and actually connect up, like even if it's just one share of one piece of feedback positive, one piece of feedback negative from the project before we jump into the rat race of like let's get as many ideas up as possible and stuff like that. um those are my thoughts there.
Love that, and talk to you about this for hours and hours and hours, but we're going to wrap it up here so we can get you back to your next meeting and all that. So where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Yeah, thank you. So you can find us at executiveoffsites.com, or the Instagram is at corporate offsites. So at corporate offsites or at executive offsites, we have both Instagrams, but that, or you can reach out to me directly at Kendall, Kendall, at executiveoffsites.com.
I'll definitely have that information in the show notes. So, Kendall, thank you so much for
Thank
your time
you.
today. Appreciate this conversation, and so thankful that there are people and teams like you out there that are making this world a better place. So, thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.